spark, and today we're imagining ourselves sending that spark outwards. We've been talking a lot about how we light the spark, and today we'll share a little about part of how we may share it. On a flight from Boston to New York, I wound up in conversation with a teenager seated next to me in the row. She was bubbly and, I tell you, filled with spark. She shared the story of how she had just spent the week with some fellow youth in Boston at a church conference focused on social justice. Now, I have to tell you, Boston being the headquarters of Unitarian Universalism and social justice being one of our core values in faith, my ears perked up. I wondered, is she a Unitarian Universalist? There are other religions, of course, that care about making a difference in the world and not wanting to be narrow-minded about it. I simply said, it sounds like you've just had an incredibly powerful experience. Tell me, what church are you a part of? She responded, oh, the normal kind. I thought to myself, I think she might be a UU. And I pushed a little. What's the normal kind, I asked. She said a bit apprehensively after a long pause, well, you could say it's one of the Protestant traditions? Now I knew she was probably a UU, and I just wanted her to be able to say it out loud to a stranger. Oh, which one, I asked. You've never heard of it, she said. I finally said, you're a Unitarian Universalist, right? Her eyes widened and she exclaimed, how did you know? So am I. I wondered if you were Boston, social justice, clearly a little nervous about having to explain our unique faith, and then just blurting out the normal kind. Kind of cinched it for me. Okay, now flash forward to last week at our newcomer lunch. Those of us that were gathered there were sharing the reasons that brought us across the threshold of a Unitarian Universalist fellowship in the first place, and also some of the gifts that we have received here. Here is what we heard. A place where being a multi-faith family is celebrated, where a Hindu, Catholic, or atheist, Protestant, etc. couple can find home. A place where every part of you is welcome, including the rational scientific side and the spiritual, longing, meaning-making side. A place where grandparents, parents, and children can come together and have positive experiences on Sunday. A place for tears and laughter, singing and silence. A place where you can put your values into action. A place where you can practice becoming your best self. Together, we create this incredible community where the fullness of who we are is welcomed and where we do have countless opportunities to grow and, yes, to catch the spark and renew the spirit. And for those of us who stay and who join, many also find this a place where these gifts can continue to unfold in our individual lives and our collective congregational life and all that we can do in the world together, which we could never do alone. One woman shared with tears in her eyes the feeling that she has at being able to bring her whole self and her whole family here in a way that honors her spiritual nature and her scientific understandings. And I was totally with her as a minister, with a science teacher as a husband. But then she started to criticize herself, really almost berate herself for not finding us sooner. She was sure that others had figured out where to look or who to ask, and was sorry that she had been so unsuccessful. Now this is where I had to break in and interrupt in her check-in. I couldn't allow her to blame herself for what I know is a problem that all too often we Unitarian Universalists have created. And if you are someone who shares our faith, when Don't shake my hand and tell me, I didn't like that sermon because I thought you were telling me I wasn't sharing our faith. I'm not telling you. Tell the story of how you share your faith to other people. So that's my disclaimer at the beginning. You see, the teenager from my story is far from unusual. I even confess that I have been that teenager at one time or another. Fearful of being included on the list of religious groups who proselytize when it is unwelcome. We forget that there are times when sharing something about who we are and our faith tradition might be helpful, even healing or life-saving for someone else. If nothing else, we can also model our curiosity and genuine interest in other faiths and other people's paths by asking the person we have just shared our story with to share their own story. Where did they go to get connected to community, to find renewal in their lives? This can be a mutual exchange where each person may learn something new and have the chance to grow spiritually. One time on a journey, leaving a young adult conference, I met a young Hindu man similar to my age at the time, and that trip from California to the East Coast went by like this. It was an amazing event and sharing, and I learned so much more than at that point I had ever known about the Hindu tradition, and so much about where there was resonance between Unitarian Universalism and that path. Now, I do understand the impulse not to proselytize, and that's actually not what I'm meaning to talk about here. Proselytizing aims at converting someone, and it may imply that if they have a faith, it is somehow defective. We do not believe that. For all the newcomers here, we do not believe that your soul is imperiled if you're not a Unitarian Universalist. We just believe that this is a vibrant and good path for many people. And in fact, if you have a vibrant and positive path, we may love to learn from it. That's why you see all those flags flying out in the Great Hall, really to honor the wisdom of all of the world's traditions and humanism and the sciences and the arts and our lives. Yes, I think what I want us to understand is the difference between proselytizing and just a little bit of publicity. Just a little bit of publicity. And I'll share, depending upon how the drive comes in, we have some money for publicity. So if there were a couple new pledges today, I have some plans for a social media campaign, a website, and more. So anyway, that was in here. Okay. No, I do remember the temptation to really not be identified with the proselytizers. When I was the campus leader of a Unitarian Universalist group at Bryn Mawr, Haverford, and Swarthmore, I swear I had a target on my back. I think that there were like added bonus points if you could convert the UU campus leader to, in this case, it happened to be something that went by the name the Campus Christian Fellowship. And that might have been a different kind of group in your college if you went to college. They would literally follow me from my apartment to my classes in the morning and witness to me about how my soul indeed was in peril until I took Jesus Christ in as my Lord and Savior. And then when that didn't work, they sent a new group of people to invite me to, the ploy was an interfaith chocolate chip pancake breakfast. And they were really smart, right? Because I didn't respond to the first, but as the UU campus leader, did I go to the interfaith chocolate chip pancake breakfast? I totally went. I was the only person that wasn't part of the Campus Christian Fellowship that morning. I was asked to rationalize my understandings of the Bible, and then about 45 minutes into it, I was taken into a van to a congregation in an undisclosed location. So, there's a lot I can share about the rest of that day, but I can understand about why you wouldn't want to be associated with that. But that is a very different thing than sharing, especially with the increasing number of people in our country that don't have a place where they can come, like many of us do here, for inspiration, for connection, and to be able to offer service in the world. You may have heard about a growing segment of the population called the nuns. How many of you have heard about the nuns? A couple. And I don't mean the ones that wear habits, by the way. N-O-N-E-S. More and more people identify this way on surveys, sharing that they don't have an affiliation with any religious tradition. But what's very interesting is very often they identify as spiritual. They say they are, who knows? Spiritual but not.
Spiritual but not religious.
That's right, SBNR, spiritual but not religious, SBNRs. So a number of us, Toby Tyler and Annette Tyler and Beverly Hayes and George Hayes and Robin Richards and Michelle Owings-Christian and Irene Mendelson and myself were all at the district annual meeting this weekend. And if I forgot someone, I apologize. Actually, Mandy helped get them organized for registration. She was there too. We learned the following from Kerry McDonald, the keynote speaker. And he was focused on what it is that is keeping specifically millennials, young adults, outside of institutions that are churches, and it was very interesting. And this research comes from the Barna Group, and it is oriented towards churches in the sense of the Christian community, but I have a funny feeling, in fact, I shouldn't put it that way, I know for a fact from other research and from my own experience with young people who identify as spiritual of all faiths, that these 6 reasons that disconnect Christians from congregations are relevant to Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, many other people. Number 1, churches seem overprotective. They seem to create sort of this pure oasis and create this refuge and sort of a barrier between that group and the world. And in fact, the Christian Fellowship on my college campus, once you joined it, they warned you, for example, not to live in a housing situation on campus next to anyone that was not a member of that Christian fellowship. So, I mean, that's what I mean by some of them, not all of them, are overprotective. That's an extreme example, but that kind of overprotecting that group from the rest of the world rather than engaging with the world. Reason number 2, teens, actually I'm going to come back to the one. Reason number 3, churches come across as antagonistic to science. Another reason, church experiences related to sexuality are often simplistic and judgmental. The next one, they wrestle with the exclusive nature of the church that they were raised in, the idea that it is the one and only path to truth. And the next reason, the church feels unfriendly to those who doubt. So Kerry McDonald shared these 5 reasons, and there's a 6th, and he said, boy, have I got the church for you. After all, science is very much alive here in every fiber of this building. We have our whole lives a sexuality and relationship curriculum that really is intentional about bringing sexuality into what it is to be a whole spiritual being. We aim to be engaged with people of other faith traditions to learn and grow. We don't know everything here. Please don't hear this cheerleading sermon as my saying that. All the religions don't culminate in Unitarian Universalism. That would be really boring, to be honest. We love the diversity out there in the world. And we are not exclusive in terms of saying that there is one path. And we love doubters here. We're like, we preach about doubting, we just love doubting. We are, in the Bible, doubting Thomas, who put his finger in the wound of Jesus. We're like, oh my God, totally. I mean, but what's wrong with that? You test, you touch, and then you know something, right? I mean, what's the harm? Maybe you just, go through the ghost, and it doesn't really prove that it doesn't exist. You can't prove God doesn't exist. You can't necessarily prove God does exist. Science has its limits. Religion has its place. Doubting. There is nothing I believe in that I haven't doubted. Doubt is such an important part of faith. Oh my gosh. In fact, I don't believe you. Mother Teresa there was a book produced after she died, which was just filled with her doubt. It was filled with her doubt. And it gave me more confidence in her faith and made me feel deeply connected to her in a way I had not been before. And then number 6, which we need to really think about a little, and this is the one he accepted and I invite us to think about, is that sometimes teens and 20-somethings' experience of the church is shallow. That they are coming longing. A lot of the participants talked about how they didn't actually feel something of the Spirit or God or something that asked them to change their lives in some way. That they came to the congregation and it was not deep enough for what they were looking for. And I think that some of our congregations, and we also need to wrestle, how do we provide an experience of shared depth and meaning here, and have that be something we think about. But there are so many people, everyone who wrote those reasons, my guess is they don't even know we exist. How many of you heard of Unitarian Universalism before you were 10 years old? Okay, and that was lifelong Unitarian Universalist, lifelong Unitarian Universalist, lifelong Unitarian Universalist, Quaker before Unitarian Universalist. Okay, how many of you heard of us by the time you were 20? Okay, a few more. How many of those people who had their hands up had read Emerson or something like that? Oh, see, like if it weren't for Emerson, we'd be in real trouble. What's going to happen? What's going to happen in 15 years if people stop reading like 19th century authors? Because they read them all the time today. So at least the Emerson publicity is good for it. Okay, how many of you heard of us by the time you were 30? Now there should be more hands. Yeah. 40? How many of you found us and heard of us for the first time when you were 50 or more? Yeah. How many of you heard of us after you were 65? The second service maybe one of us, okay? And the second service we're going to have a lunch. So now let me ask how many hands to go up in the air feel that your life might have been enhanced if you had not necessarily even become a Unitarian Universalist, but just knew of our existence earlier. Would it have been a positive thing? Yeah. So that's partly what this is about, and it's partly what our weekend was about, really wrestling with this. Publicity is not a dirty word, I swear. I swear. So the first thing we talked about was in one of the workshops that I was involved in, a lot of the people that were there wanted to know, there were 3 of us ministers on the panel, and this was talking about people who are inspired by Jewish, Buddhist, and Christian sources in their Unitarian Universalist journey. And people really wanted an elevator speech. And what that means is that, right, if you got in on the 9th floor, by the 1st floor, if someone like that poor deer in the headlights teenager asks you what congregation you belong to, you don't have to say, the normal kind. That's an answer. It's an interesting answer. So let me just share briefly, if I had to, from 9 to 1, this is what I would say. That Unitarian Universalists really share a belief that we all come from one source, from the same source, and that ultimately we are all headed to the same place and our destinies are intertwined. Unitarian, same source. Universalists, our destinies are intertwined. And therefore we must protect the source or sources of all life on earth, and we must work for the betterment of all people, and that our very own lives depend upon this understanding and living out these faithful beliefs. And then I love it because one of our cats was in the workshop, Beverly Hayes, and she asked the most excellent question: why do we need an elevator speech? Why is it a good thing to be able to sum up a tradition in 30 seconds, or from the 9th floor to the 1st floor anyway? So, number one, I invite you to think about a response that would be something meaningful. And number two, I love Beverly's question. I've been really reflecting on it. And we are not, when someone asks you what your church or what your fellowship, congregation, society, temple believes, they're actually asking a question from the Christian perspective, from Paul's perspective. It was Paul who said, beliefs matter. But many religious traditions are not about belief, they're about practice. It's about, in Judaism, it's just as much about practice as it is about belief. In Islam, it's maybe even more so about practice. In Buddhism, it's all about practice. So remember that already in that question, somebody is asking you to answer something that's a little different, because we have many beliefs in this house. So, but what we have is a shared set of commitments we call our 7 principles, a shared covenant, and a shared set of experiences around how we aim to live out that covenant in the world. If you are new and have never read the 7 principles, please open the Gray Songbook, and if you look right before the first hymn, you'll find the 7 principles right there. That's our covenant. That's our shared set of promises about how we aim to be with one another and to build a more spiritually whole and just world together. So I was in another workshop, and one of the things we talked about was how would we share who we are using 3 action verbs, because we are about experiences and what we do together, not necessarily what we believe. So these are the 3 that I give you to hold as someone asks you next time. When you have that glow, because you've just worked with Toby Tyler on a habitat project, or you have that glow because your child in religious education just told you how great Sunday school was that day and how much they want to go back, or because you're a teacher and a child in your class told you that and you can't wait to go back, or because you were sitting in the most, it's like an advertisement for the board, the most incredible board meeting, and you can't believe how enlightened everyone around you is to so sophisticatedly lead a committee like that. Actually, it does happen. It does happen. But I would be lying if I said it happened every time. But it does happen. So when you have, or coming from choir, you name it, I invite you to think about these 3 verbs that I think are important to our shared experience: inspire, connect, and serve. If we are doing these 3 things, we are living out the covenant of Unitarian Universalism. So inspire. So I'm meeting someone, Jim, we'll call him, and we're on a plane together, and it's a long plane, and we're chatting about different things, and I can't escape religion unless I lie about my profession. I have some fellow colleagues that say that they're an insurance salesman. Where's Tom Cruise doing? But so religion comes up, and I don't have to worry because they're right? If they continue the conversation, then I know they're curious, right? So now I might say, yeah, if you want to know something about the congregation where I am, really it's about 3 things. It's about inspiration, connection, and service. So I'm going to tell you really quickly 3 examples. We believe in the prophethood and priesthood of all believers, which means that I share my portion of the truth, but we believe that everyone has the spark of the divine and can share deep truths. And so I was at a worship service a couple of months ago, where a young, and I wouldn't use your last name because that would be nice, but here we know you, Robert, P, we'll say from here, because we're on tape. And he shared the most moving reflection. That actually, I've been thinking about it. I'm someone that happens to have Jewish heritage and lost family in the Holocaust. And when he shared this story in the context of a service about forgiveness, and talked about how his son has a grandparent who is a Nazi and a grandparent who is Jewish, and talked about how these tensions could exist in one family, and that out of that context, love is born. And love does get reborn in the most surprising places. I tell you, I could feel it in my heart that I would look differently. The next time I saw a photograph of a soldier, that I would be changed somehow, that I still don't have the words to name, but I know that I am growing and healing. And connect. We have the most amazing multi-generational community. Where else in this world can you be in a community with 6-year-olds, 26-year-olds, 46-year-olds, 76-year-olds, and someone who's turning 100 this week? I tell you, the wisdom that gets shared from that is just, it's powerful. And my parents are gone, and Asher's grandmother is somewhere else, and it adds so much to my life that enriches me, and I could tell you more about how community makes a difference, but that's just one thing. And serve. I have all of these incredible, lofty principles that I've been raised with, and alone I could never imagine alleviating hunger and homelessness, which happens to be our signature project focus really over the last few years. But with my community, we've actually created a workers connection where people can come for temporary work and be guaranteed fair wages, where we can work together to ensure that at the holiday time and Christmas time, people have the opportunity to buy gifts that, again, offer fair wages to the mostly women that have crafted those wonderful jewelry pieces and things for our homes. So even the way we can purchase together collectively has changed. And I could go on. Service is so much of who we are, as I said. And guess what? So if you could share just one thing about inspiration, connection, and service, people will know something about the experience of being a Unitarian Universalist. So why do I go to this congregation? Why did I ultimately become a minister? Because it is where I feel inspired. It is how I can make the deepest of connections, and it is how I can be of service in the world. And at the end of my life, those three things are going to be significant in terms of a life lived well, not knowing how long any of us has. So I'll end with this. If you're bold, and as I said, just by naming my profession, it comes up, I've decided I'd play a little game in traveling. And remember, I'm not saying the whole population is going to be Unitarian Universalist. Many people want one path and one set of answers. But here's a little fun statistic. When I sit next to people on a plane or a train, and they happen to ask me what I do and religion comes up, 50% of the time, 50% of the time, I wind up being asked, oh, can you write down the address of the nearest Unitarian Universalist congregation to me? And 50% of the time, I have heard a great story about where someone else finds an opportunity to get inspired, to get connected, and to make a difference in the world. So I say to the introverts, it's okay to just introduce yourself once in a while. You never know. You just might change someone's whole life. May it be so.